When I was in high school, when I was my senior year, I joined the Army Reserves. So I went to basic training in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and I graduated probably just a couple of weeks before I showed up to campus.
Dave Bolger here, and welcome to Had I Known, a show that explores the journeys of some of the most interesting members of the Hamilton College community. This week's guest is Rob Romanowski, class of 1999. Hey, happy Super Bowl Sunday. If you're listening to this on release day, it is Super Bowl Sunday. It's a big deal. I mean, we're all longing for some sense of normalcy. So let's get back to normal by having a big, massive celebration with just your family and no friends over. I hope you enjoy the Super Bowl. I don't talk much about my day job, but I think people know that I work for the National Football League. So it may be a little self-serving to talk about the Super Bowl. But I hope everyone has it on. Every screen in the house and every device, stream it. You can stream it. I mean, even though you're not able to have a big party this year, still with your family, even if you're by yourself, get a little return to normalcy and watch the Super Bowl. Maybe you're rooting for Tom Brady. Maybe you're rooting against Tom Brady. Either way, tune in. In the grand scheme of the world, there's so many bigger things to worry about and think about. But there's also something to be said for Super Bowl's happening on schedule. Eat some wings, have a few drinks, and enjoy the show. Maybe you're a fan of The Weeknd, Super Bowl halftime show, The Weeknd. Maybe check that out. And if you're listening to this episode after the Super Bowl, well, first, what took you so long? And second, wasn't that great? What a game, huh? Can you believe that ending? How about that halftime show? It was great, wasn't it? And those commercials? Oh, that one was funny. It was really funny, wasn't it? And Brady, huh? Oh, man. Can you believe it? I'm not taking my job too seriously, because if I do, I'm reminded that there are people out there doing real work, making a real difference in our communities. Like this week's guest, Rob Romanowski, class of 1999. Rob's job is to help Americans around the world as a Foreign Service Officer for the U.S. State Department. And it was incredibly interesting to hear about the work Rob does and hearing about Rob's Hamilton experience, where just about every step of the way, including right before he started, having some connection to the military. You know, I've talked before about one of the reasons I started the show was to get an understanding of what other people's Hamilton experiences were like, and boy, Rob's was a lot different than mine. Now, I knew Rob at Hamilton. This is another episode where I talk to somebody I know. You know, similar to actors saying they'll make some movies for the studio and then some for themselves. I tend to record conversations with people I don't know, and then I slip in one with someone I know. And I was excited to talk to Rob for this show because it's truly fascinating work he does, traveling the world helping Americans. So I think it's another good one this week. Hope you enjoy it. Here's my conversation with Rob Romanowski, class of 1999. I should have known that the military guy would have been 2 minutes early, and I should have been prepared for that. Sorry.
Some things haven't changed.
I saw the notification that you joined. I'm like, oh, God, I got to go. I should have known.
But, you know, I'm very easy. I recognize I have patience, and I go in a couple of minutes early, but I'm looking through some notes here, and you know,
it's the rule I want to institute with my teams at work, the Tom Coughlin rule. If you're not 5 minutes early, you're late.
That's true. Although, you know, it can get to the point where, you know, I saw this in the military. You know, when you got these cascading organizations, you got to be 5 minutes early for this guy, 5 minutes early for this guy, 5 minutes. And next thing you know, you're a half hour early sitting in the rain. You know, And then the guy you're waiting for is like, why are you guys so early?
Oh man. Well, you're the first guest I've ever had that had to get State Department clearance. So that was a fun.
It was actually surprisingly quick and no issues whatsoever. But
Yeah, I didn't know if I should. I didn't know if I should take offense to that. They're like, oh, that? No, yeah, no problem.
Well, showing up early and being a little cautious about clearances is something that my different career paths have taught me. So
I'll bet. So how you been? You doing all right?
I'm doing very well. It's nice to be back in the U.S. I've been overseas for a while, so now this is close to the third year now that we've been consecutively back in the U.S.
Okay.
Otherwise, I've been overseas for a good part of the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years. But no, I'm here in Virginia. I mean, it's crazy times, but I really can't complain as far as everything goes. My life situation is pretty stable, and my kids are older, so yeah, it's 12 and 15.
Okay, wow.
So the house is split up into different little workstations, but we have a home, we have a backyard. I really feel for folks who are maybe in an apartment or with younger kids and both parents are working. It would be very difficult,
Yeah. The battles over Wi-Fi alone. It's we have dueling Zooms going on constantly between my job and the kids and my wife doing a lot of stuff that she's doing. It's like everyone's like, take everything off, take your phones off the internet. We need the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, which explains why you're in the closet right now, right?
No. It's my recording studio. This is my recording studio. Will you be in the States for a while now, or what's the outlook?
So I'll probably be heading off again at the end of the summer.
Oh, wow.
So right now I'm kind of in between assignments. I'm doing language. So the one nice thing about being the Foreign Service in the Department of State is that you get opportunities before your next assignments to sometimes on whatever the job is, you get to learn the language before you go off to your next assignment, your next post. Oh, wow. So I'm learning Russian full time right now, which is a real fun language. Nothing like 7 different grammar cases. So it's and it's so it's that's fantastic that's all I'm doing right now. It's nice to have a singular focus. This is just my job is to learn language, of course, but learning a language is something that never really ends. It's not like, oh, I've learned it, so
right.
It's every day when I'm kind of not studying or something is a moment I feel maybe I should be spending my time practicing things. But
if I knew Russian, I would conduct the conversation in Russian, but I can't help you.
It would be a short interview because I'm not quite there yet.
So that's your job right now, is to learn Russian.
That's right. Yeah. Wow. So I went from, my job. So I don't know what would be helpful. I can kind of give you a quick.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you what it is you do. Yeah. When other than learn languages.
So I'm a Foreign Service officer in the Department of State. Also, I guess with the Foreign Service is a body of people. I think it's about 13,000 now, consisting of kind of generalists and specialists in the diplomatic service for the State Department. So we're promoting U.S. interests overseas, and I'm also as part of that. I'm particularly specialized as a consular officer. So my priority is helping U.S. citizens overseas, and we do also visa work, passports. If you get in trouble overseas, we're there to assist where we can, and things of that nature. So I've had a number of tours overseas, and I'm studying Russian right now for my next post in Uzbekistan. So I'm going off to Central Asia.
Wow,
which I've never been to. It was my top choice. And
why was it your top choice? Just because it's part of the world you've never been to, or?
Yeah, that was part of it. There's something exciting about that region. I've had a lot of really great adventures in the places that I've been, and this is I like the history of the area. I like the fact that I got to learn Russian for it. There were some other places on my list. Again, I don't get to pick just anywhere, but there's some
Sure.
when you go to from assignments, you look at what's available. You look at per your kind of your grade, your timing, your family, because if you have kids, you're looking at schooling, and then also you're lobbying for these things. It's the people that have these vacancies or projected vacancies have to agree, have to select you, right?
Uh-huh.
So
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
there's a bit of a lobbying process involved, and but Central Asia, Uzbekistan particularly, seems like a really fascinating place. The old Silk Road, you
Mhm.
have Samarkand, Bukhara. It's where the Mongol Empire extended, and with the Soviet Union, and just a region I've never been to, and I'm particular to places um, that I feel, personal in my personal life, would be an adventure for my kids and everyone else, but also for career wise, that I can do some good, and I can have an impact, and that the things I bring to the foreign service will be valued.
Mm. Is there a set time frame that when you go to take these posts, that you'll be there for a certain amount of time, or is it open ended?
No, you can generally, assignments are between 2 years and 3 years. So sometimes there's some flexibility. You can extend for a year. So if it's a 2 year assignment, you can extend for a three, and
Got it.
3 to a 4. But generally not much more than that. Not as a foreign service generalist, which is what I am. And in a nutshell, the foreign service generals are split up into like cones. So they're kind of fields and specialties. So you have consular folks who are doing visas and American services, political folks who are doing reporting on political matters. You have your econ, you have your administrative folks, so public diplomacy. So you pick kind of your cone when you're applying for the foreign service.
I see.
And I've picked consular because I always thought with consular work, you see the impact immediately when you're helping out a U.S. citizen overseas that's in trouble or has an issue, or even also with when you're even doing visa work. People are coming to the embassy or consulate that are requesting a particular visa to the United States, and you're reviewing their application and making that decision. You see people from all sectors of that country, from farmers to students to exchange to businessmen. You really get a sense of that country just from talking to so many people, which is why learning the local language is
Right.
one of the reasons is so helpful, because if I do interviews or meetings, I'm doing those in the foreign language.
And I imagine along the way, your perception or understanding of those countries and the locals there must evolve, and you get a whole new perspective on what that country's all about.
Yeah, for sure. Prior to going out to a place, I try to read as much of the literature as I can, and also just not just on books, but look at stuff from. You meet with folks in the State Department and elsewhere who are working on those issues, and talk and having meetings and trying to get what the issues are. But yeah, of course, when you're there, you're learning it. you're learning it for real, right? What and getting your own sense of the challenges or the relationship, or
What kind of surprises have you picked up in doing that kind of work?
I mean, I've been fortunate. I think everywhere I've been, the people have been very welcoming for the most part, and I'm always surprised how well received. I guess maybe it's maybe why am I surprised, right? But I'm always amazed at how welcoming people are to the things that we bring, to the conversations we have, to if we're promoting a program or trying to resolve a certain issue. That there's a lot of success, and it's really there is importance of learning the language and being there and getting to know a culture, and government in trying to do this work.
How does the changing political landscape over the course of your career impact the work you do? I imagine the perception of the United States and other parts of the world has evolved, right, for better or worse. I imagine that has some sort of impact.
Yeah, that's a good question. Of course, in the I joined the Foreign Service in 2008, so I've served through different administrations,
right?
And both Democrat and Republican alike, and I serve in the executive branch, so I support those policies and support the goals and the mission, particularly for consular, where the number one priority is helping U.S. citizens. It's pretty clear, that cuts across, political lines. Of course, with visas, which is kind of the other part of our work, that does change. I mean, the foundations of our laws and regulations are largely the same. Sometimes things can be tweaked or reprioritized, and we adjust. I mean, we're there to make sure that we're carrying out the current laws and regulations. But on the political landscape, of course, best selling point of America is the American landscape here. Our economy, our political structure and example. When that's going well here, that speaks well abroad, of course.
Sure. Yeah.
Because unlike maybe decades ago, with the social media and so many different lines of communication today, the perceptions of anything, but certainly of our government and our values, can be discussed, can be, there can be misinformation. It's harder to portray our values through all that noise.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Sure, sure.
It's not like you're just having, an interview with the one journalist in the one newspaper, in the country. There's so many segments of a society that you have to engage with, and
right.
That maybe you didn't have to do as much before. And I have been struck by the misperceptions of things, or of the United States abroad sometimes, because there's other forces at work that we do have competitors, and they may be shaping a different narrative about us than
right.
And so that's something that we have to work against.
How many languages do you have under your belt now?
So, not too many, but my mind's like an Etch-a-Sketch. So if you, I can't. So I started off with I'll just say with tours I went. So then So I started off, and my first assignment was to Cambodia. So I learned Khmer. And then I went to Zambia in Southern Africa, and that's English speaking. So I got lucky there. And then I went to Indonesia, and so I learned Indonesian. And now, then I had an assignment here in near Washington, and now I'm going to Uzbekistan to learn Russian. So I'm learning Russian. But
family along with you on all those stops?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
How the kids enjoy traveling the world?
They love it. And it's really all they know, which was kind of by design. I was looking to after college, I joined the Army. I was in the Army for 6 years, and then I was in diplomatic security for a couple of years, which is also in the State Department. And I was looking at the Foreign Service, looking at different tracks to go in. And one of the jobs I was looking at probably had some work abroad, but also work here in the United States. And I was like, well, I'm not so sure that how good it would be if the kids, their first real experience going overseas is when they're, 8 or 9 or 10, or that can be just trickier as opposed to I take them overseas when they're 3 months old. And then that's what they live.
Right.
And that's my younger son was I think he was about 6 months when we went to Cambodia.
Wow.
So, and yeah. And, we've gone back and forth, obviously for some vacation in the U.S., but also for training. I learned those languages here. So very fortunate, but we've had quite a bit of adventures, just living overseas, but also the vacations we've been able to take. So much easier to travel around a region when you're that's your base, right?
Right.
So.
Do you so you do get to be a bit of a tourist in some way while you're over there as well?
Oh, that's one of the best parts of the job.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So, like, Indonesia, for example, it's an amazing country of 17,000 islands. And, we were based in Surabaya, which is in East Java. And you're able to travel a little bit around Southeast Asia relatively easily with, cheap airlines and things like that. But also it was just exciting to just travel Indonesia. There's so many different things to see. And also during my work, for example, we had an office in Bali and a small office in Bali because there's lots of tourists, American tourists there, and it's primarily there to help out all the tourists who get in trouble. Lose their passports, but some that get in trouble too.
Yeah.
And for a period of time, I would travel there probably once a month for different things, and it was about a 45-minute plane ride, and it's Bali, so in the course of my work, I've been able, because in my job is engaging with different communities, whether they're Americans overseas or students that are interested in studying in the United States, or meetings with UN organizations, what have you. So I get to travel different parts of that country or even in the region. So it's kind of a dream job, and I've been real fortunate.
And family's excited about this next one?
Yes, for the most part. The U.S. is always coming back to the States, and this was always something I was a little reluctant to do, just because the U.S. is so amazing. We have so many things here. It's such an amazing big country. COVID, withstanding, the ease of life in the United States is the gravitational pull. I've seen folks come back to the States and then maybe get another job here and extend, and then the kids are in high school, and then and so I have to break that. It's you have to go back to somewhere where the internet's cutting out, and and there's some different hardships, and you're surrounded with the kids that don't learn I think one of the things they were looking forward most to coming back to the States was being in a country where everyone spoke English. Now a lot of the places they do speak, a lot of folks do speak English, but not predominantly.
Sure.
It's not like the Netherlands or something.
Sure.
I could see. I've always been pretty fortunate because I get the opportunity to learn and I communicate, and I'm in the civil society, and we're at a movie theater or wherever I can talk and have a conversation. But for them, it's trickier.
Interesting. Do they have a sense of home? Would the U.S. be considered home for them, or have they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We try to come back to, that for me, that was important because I don't know if but I grew up overseas as well. And so I want to make sure that they do have a sense of the U.S. And so when they come back and we go visit family here, we go to the same vacation spot. So places that some continuity, some regularity, they can, as opposed to if we just, arrive in the U.S. and travel to different places, like it's another tourist trip, that would be a different experience.
So you grew up overseas, military family as well?
No. So I grew up in Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah. My dad had worked for Pan Am. And then when Pan Am went went under. He got a job. Saudi Arabian Airlines was looking for expertise and kind of building, in their national airline. And so in the early 80s, we moved to Jeddah, right on the Red Sea. And that's where I lived for about 8 years.
Wow.
And then after the first Gulf War, shortly thereafter, we moved. Some of us moved. My dad stayed for a couple more years, but then we moved back to Massachusetts, or moved to Massachusetts, where I have family near Boston. And so I did high school on Cape Cod, and because another reason my parents picked that place is all the excellent schools in Massachusetts, all the amazing universities, and so of course I pick a college in New York. They're like, you gotta be kidding me! I got all these, in-state tuition, all these amazing, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to New York.
How did you pick Hamilton?
I think, like many people, we did the tour. You go with your parents in the car, and you have, you've whittled down to a list of schools that kind of intrigue you. And some were in the South, some were in Pennsylvania. I think Hamilton may have been the only one in New York. And I remember just going to the campus, and it was just a gorgeous campus. I think we went in the summer. So maybe if it'd been different if I went in November or something, but it was summer. It's an amazing campus, and I'm looking at things, and I like I'm kind of a history buff, and the history that the Alexander Hamilton, but also I think there's even like Baron von Steuben. There's some history there at the Continental Army. Hamilton had everything, had all these different things, different sports teams and clubs, and all these different things to offer. So it was tremendously appealing, and I got accepted. So that was helpful. So yeah, I really loved the campus, and it was well regarded, as it still is.
Yeah,
and I took advantage, I think, pretty well. I also had a radio show, and I did crew. I belonged to a couple different clubs, and of course, I studied a lot. But it had everything. You just had to take advantage of it.
My early memory of you, I think my first memory and first impression of you was probably, I don't know if it was our first night at the school or second night. There was, during orientation, some sort of like icebreaker. Everybody get together and
in the circle,
share their feelings and how, and all that. And there was this guy sitting across the circle from me who I'm not going to remember what the name's right, but I remember you said something to the degree of, the best way I can describe my beliefs are I'm a cross between, I think it was Trent Reznor and you had said Pat Buchanan or something. It was something like, and I was like, I'm not even sure I know who those people are. I was so dumb. And I'm like, who is this guy?
I don't know. So here's something interesting. Maybe you didn't know. So when I was in high school, when I was my senior year, I joined the Army Reserves. So I went to basic training in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And I graduated probably just a couple of weeks before I showed up to campus.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm sure I had a very short haircut because I just come out of basic training where, they shave your head completely.
Yeah. I mean, you screamed military the moment you walked on campus.
It was because I was literally weeks out of graduating from basic training.
I don't think I knew that. Wow.
Yeah. And I was kind of thinking as I was thinking about this podcast, I'm like, why the heck did I join the reserves in my senior year of high school? I'm not entirely sure. I think I was interested in the military, as obviously it shows later that I joined the military. And maybe I wasn't ready to jump feet first. And I was like, well, I'll just join the reserves. And I get to kind of sample it and see what I think. It's not a full-time thing. I can still go to college. And that's what I did. So my head was probably in a little different area.
Right.
But it was actually kind of a good thing when I recall, is that I was amazed by how much free time I had. You go from being in basic training where when you finally got any time to yourself, which was maybe the 6th weekend or something like that, everyone basically ran to the payphone in a long line to call family. That's what you did. There was nothing else that you were allowed to do. You could maybe go to the shop at and get a soda, but otherwise. So then suddenly I arrived at college, and there's
nothing but
I'm
time.
I'm in charge of how I want to spend my night or whatever, which was I think pretty good for discipline wise, actually. But the following summer, because I still had a commitment, so this would be after our freshman year. That rest of that summer, I was in Alabama for 10 weeks for the summer, doing kind of a specialty training for the Army, because it was a certain program where they split it up. You split up the basic training, and then you learn your specialty. So,
and was it all kids? We were kids. Was it all kids similar to you of in college and splitting time?
No, I was no.
So you were the college boy that they were probably making fun of then?
It was incredible. The basic training was pretty amazing. And I came actually, I had someone famous in my my platoon. Do you know Brock Lesnar?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. He was my platoon guide. So when I joined up, there was a group of soldiers who all kind of signed up around the same time, largely from South Dakota and from the West. And they were all in kind of my training platoon, right? Our platoon. And Brock was one of them. And because he was the biggest guy even then, the drill sergeants made him the platoon guide, which basically means he's got a leadership role. And I was one of the squad leaders. They picked me, which is not really what you want. You kind of want to be hidden and basically you don't want to be any engagement with the drill sergeants, because you do anything and then you're the target for something, and responsible for everything. But it was an amazing experience, because you really do get to meet some Americans from areas of the country I never, we had Native Americans, Sioux Indians, in my platoon, a lot of them because they're from the Dakotas. And I'd never, I'd never known people who grew up, either on a reservation or like that. And that was, and then of course the following summer when I'm in Alabama, that was a different experience. We did have a lot of guys from the South. I remember one guy from Boston with a really thick accent. He got in trouble all the time. He didn't have to do anything, but just, whenever he talked, he was just a target. But so it was pretty amazing.
Wow. Did it surprise you to see where Brock Lesnar ended up in wrestling?
I remember where I was. Yeah, I was in the Army at this point. I was getting ready to go to a school, and I was, where there was a bunch of us all in one house. We were all just, and I was doing something on the computer, and we had the TV on, and they mentioned his name. Just won some wrestling competition, like a national wrestling. I was like, Brock Lesnar. I'm like, what? I know that guy. And I didn't, we weren't great buddies or anything, but
sure.
Yeah, he was in a platoon of 25, 30 people, soldiers. So yeah, we interacted every day, and but yeah. And then amazing to see how his career progressed. So
right, yeah. I'm trying to put myself in your headspace of coming out of basic training, then arriving weeks later at Hamilton, and then going back, to do more military after school. I mean, it almost feels like you would have to switch your brain into different modes to be able to survive, right?
Yeah, actually.
Or did you just walk around campus being like, these everyone here is just so soft and I can crush all these people?
No, but every summer in Hamilton, I did some military training. Now because I joined ROTC as well, and
that I knew.
That's how I got into the Army after I graduated. Literally after I graduated, 4 hours after graduation, I was driving down to Fort Benning.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
But I had 2 days to get there.
Wow.
But so if nothing else, you have a job in the Army. I do remember like senior year, all of my friends were like, where am I going to go? Am I going to go to graduate school? Am I going to intern somewhere? And I'm like, I'm not worried about this. I know exactly where I'm going. So
Oh, there's something to that. Yeah.
there is something to that. But no, I had this school. It was actually military police school in right after freshman year. It was right before your sophomore. That was about 10 or so weeks in Alabama, in Fort McClellan, which I think is now since closed. And that was interesting. But again, getting yelled at all the time. So you go from a college environment, and this is your like, hey, this is your summer. And then I go to my summer and it's hot. And, I'm getting yelled at all the time. But then the following, I eventually left the reserves because I started doing ROTC. And I was interested in ROTC because they had some neat schools that you could get. They had slots, like airborne school I was particularly interested in. And so I got the slot for that. I did ROTC through Syracuse. And so I think it was my junior year. No, I think it was also my sophomore year. Sorry. It's all kind of blends together. I think I also did airborne school.
Wow.
And then one of the other years I did training for ROTC out in Washington State. So,
and what was the commitment like? Because there were things you would have to do. I mean, I remember seeing you going off or coming back from whatever it is you had to do. I mean, imagine there were certain days of the week or times of the week that you had to be there? Yeah.
So if I remember correctly, it was once a week. Every Thursday we went up to Syracuse. And sometimes, and that was generally it. Sometimes we'd have a weekend. But it was kind of funny because the first year I was juggling both the reserves and ROTC. So I would still go to like a drill on the weekend. And there was like I would go to Utica. There would be a guy that would come by and pick me up, and he lived in Utica and take me to the drill. And it was kind of dull, actually. We didn't really do much. Though I remember we went up to West Point once and did like traffic security or something, and some kid asked me for my autograph. Things you remember, because I had the uniform on, and it was all like white gloves and looking sharp, whatever. But it wasn't very impressive, and eventually got out of that. Basically, when I went full-time ROTC, that wiped away my commitment to be in the Army Reserves. I went full-time ROTC.
Yeah.
Which honestly, that's not where I thought I was going to go when I started. I just thought, hey, ROTC, great. They got, I'd love to go to airborne school, and I see you can get a slot there. So let me start. And and the cadre in Syracuse loved me because I'd actually gone to basic training. So, I'm addressing them properly, like, yeah, sergeant, sergeant, and I could do the formations and movements, and, I wasn't a student learning drill. I had,
right.
Yeah. So, I stuck out a little bit in that regard, but yeah, it was once a week, and then sometimes a weekend, but not too often. And
you weren't alone. There were other Hamilton students that were part of it.
There was 3 of us, so a lot, right? And then I think we got 4.
Okay.
And Syracuse was great. There were a few. I think we were called like a satellite school, and so they provided a bus, and they would pick us up, and then we would stop at a couple other schools along the way to Syracuse. So, it was something. It wasn't tremendously demanding or anything. I think that the biggest commitment is like you do a school in your junior year in Washington State. Everyone does that. I can't remember exactly. I think it's like 5 weeks. But again, I really wanted to do the airborne school, and that's not very long. And I got that. And so I was really happy. And then they basically, the cadre there, like, hey, we can help pay for your school if you just sign a contract. I'm like, oh, yeah, let's do it. So, yeah. So while
ROTC wasn't the initial plan, clearly having gone, through basic training and joining the reserves prior to school, military was the plan for you in some capacity.
At some point, yeah, I think maybe my sophomore year, around then, I was like, yeah, it became like, yeah, let's do this. Let's do it for a short period of time. I never thought of it as a full-time career, like I'm
Gotcha.
gonna be in for 20 years, but
Yeah.
I liked the experiences I had. I mean, even there's something even in your basic training where, I mean, it's it's kind of like the movies, right? They yell at you a lot. You do a lot of stupid stuff. They kind of strip you down, right, and then build you back up. And when you're done, there's a bit more pride, and there's maybe have a little bit more discipline, and I think it was a force for good with my personality. And then Hamilton was great in a way because it tempered all that, tempered maybe where you would, just because, Hamilton's not like the military, and people that go there aren't really that way either. So it was kind of softened all that. And so I think I came out of both.
Interesting. And that wasn't a challenge for you. It seems like you enjoyed sort of the duality of your existence in some way.
Yeah, no, I think so. Because ROTC, again, it was great. It was a lot of instruction, but it wasn't, it wasn't like basic training or anything like that. It's you're learning the skills that the basic skills, but it's not like, I'll give you an example. I mean, in basic training, you're like you're all packed together in like what they call a cattle truck, like a steel truck with little slits, right? And it's baking in there, and you come out, and there's a whole, like when you arrive, and there's a whole line of drill sergeants. You just see them. I think it's what they call like a shark attack, and then just start screaming and screaming. You're dumping everything. They're just it's just chaos, and they're just loving it, and the people you meet, there's such a really unique group. I mean, there's people that are excellent, and there's people that probably shouldn't be in the military. Yeah. And that's found out there,
Right.
And this kind of crazy stuff. And then, of course, then you go to airborne school and you're jumping out of planes.
And you mentioned a few times that's something you wanted to do, and that was just, you just had a desire to jump out of planes, so you wanted to be able to do that, or did you think that might end up being something you would do down the road?
It was funny because, you take one step, and you're in the Army, you're doing basic training. Then you hear about, there's this school that does this. I'm like, that sounds interesting. And then so, maybe where it's something I hadn't ever thought about, but now because I've in that environment, I heard about it. I'm like, yeah, I'd like to try that. Sounds kind of interesting. And then you do that, and then you hear about another school. Well, let me try to see if I can do that. So.
And then you graduate and literally head out to your new career, which is being in the Army.
Yeah.
And then 9/11 hit shortly thereafter, and what you thought was going to be your career in the military probably changed pretty drastically, I'd imagine.
Yes. So I graduated because the ROTC deal. As soon as you graduate, you become a second lieutenant. And I was a infantry officer. That's the branch I selected. It's one of the branches that if you select it, you get it. And so
did you know that when you were signing up?
Yeah, it was funny actually. I don't know how interesting this is, but I did kind of it was a struggle for me to decide what branch I wanted to be in the Army. And actually, I think I had chosen something else at first, and I think military intelligence or something like that. I was like, that'd be interesting. And I remember we'd have a bunch of us in Hamilton when we were taking that bus ride back home from Syracuse. We'd all be, it's like one of those old buses, so it's nighttime. We're all laying across the seats, with you straddling the aisle. And I remember we would talk a lot. And I'm like, I think I want to do infantry. It was always for me something, can I do it? Because if you went infantry as an officer, you're going to Ranger School. You're signed up for that. And that's probably one of the hardest schools in the Army, if not the hardest, right? Mm-hmm. And so you knew that's part of the deal. You sign up, you go to like, And I'm like, well, do I want to sign up for that? Am I worried? Will I make it? I don't want to fail, and I end up choosing something different, like military. I think it was military intelligence or something like that. And I remember it was like the day that my paperwork had to be put in. I think I went to the lady's house, and it was in Syracuse, and I scratched it out, put infantry on the top. And of course, I got it then. So good. You put in the top 5 and you would get it.
That's funny.
But so I got commissioned. I went down to Fort Benning, which is the home of the infantry. I did go through those schools, and I eventually, after it's almost like I want to say like 9-10 months of schools, and after that, I got assigned to Italy. To Vicenza, but there was some kind of mix-up. But with my orders, and I took it, and I'm like, I'm going off to Italy. So I showed up to Italy. No one knew I was coming, and then word got around that I really wasn't supposed to be there, and they and I spent like the weekend in Vicenza, and then they pushed me up to Germany, which is not bad at all. So I did my time in Germany. And that's when, like you said, 9/11, I was in Germany during that. And then we deployed to Kosovo. I changed my branches. That was part of my deal. I changed from infantry to signal corps. So I thought I'd get a mixture of kind of a combat unit, but also a unit with what I presumed would be a skill.
And what is that? What is signal corps? What is
it's like communications. Got it. So I learned about routers and things like that, which in the end I didn't do anything with. But then in 2004 deployed to Iraq, and then did a tour there for like 14 months or something like that. Wow. And then when I came back, that was about my time was ending. And got out of the Army, and because it was kind of on the point where I was a captain at that point, and everyone was either making that decision. You either stay in for longer, and then you're kind of doing. You might as well at that point go for the career, or that's kind of the point where then you would get out. And again, I had an amazing time. I had amazing experiences, but I never really came with the intention of making it for the full 20 or something. So I got out.
Right. And does the potential of being deployed again weigh into that decision at all?
It wouldn't have been immediately, but, and I didn't have a horrible experience in Iraq. I mean, I was single, and I mean, we were in Tikrit, in Saddam's old hometown, and I mean, there was, looking back on it, like, I think the key factor was that I was single, didn't have a family, and so I always kind of thought if anything ever happened to me, that's it, right? I mean, but when you have a family, then that equation much different,
sure,
right?
Yeah.
I look back at some of the risks I took. And there were a few of them, and some pretty stupid looking back. And they weren't that big of a deal for me at the time because it was just me. But now with a family, I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I would have done it like that,
Wow.
So I mean, I don't think so much it was just another deployment. I had already been in the Army longer than my commitment, because when the Iraq War came, they're just you might have heard the stop loss. Things were just, you weren't able to get out. So, and so I'd already, exceeded that. And it was really a decision of, if I was to stay longer, I'd have to go to another school, which would then put a longer commitment.
Right.
And I wasn't prepared to do that.
Yeah, I have a cousin who's made a career of it, and I remember there would be these inflection points of, well, he's got to make the decision, and if he's in, then he's in, and if he doesn't, then he's
exactly.
Yeah.
So
then you decide not to continue. Did you have a plan, or did you have an idea what you wanted to do?
I didn't have a good one. I really didn't, and but I had some. I had been in Iraq for for again, I think it was like 14 months, and I really wasn't spending on anything.
Uh-huh.
And so I had a decent bank account. And I went back to Georgia. My parents lived in Georgia at the time. And I was considering maybe going to the Coast Guard, but then as it turned out, I found out I had too much experience.
Huh.
How do I have too much experience? But that's what, I guess I had 6 years in the Army, and that was exceeded what you could be as an officer in the Coast Guard. I thought Coast Guard would be kind of cool. Like, hey, you're posted all on the water. It's always the water. And I like the water. And yeah, so then I didn't have a job. And I was like, well, let me go up to DC. And this point, by this point, I was married. And so I, through a connection from college, someone told me about diplomatic security was hiring. And that's kind of a law enforcement agency in the State Department. So they're the ones who are in charge of like embassy security overseas, but also here in the United States. They're like in some senses like the Secret Service, but if it's not a head of state. Mm-hmm. So if the Pope comes, or the Dalai Lama, for example, came to the States and needed, protection, it would be diplomatic security. It's actually a pretty interesting career path.
Yeah.
So I was a civil servant with them. I got to know a lot of the agents. I was there for a couple of years, and that's when the Foreign Service test came up. And of course, the folks that I was working with in diplomatic security were like, "Hey, why don't you join us?" Mm-hmm. A lot of prior military there, a lot of prior law enforcement. I was like, "Yeah, pretty good idea." So I put in an application for both, and this rarely happens, but I got accepted to both. After it's a fairly lengthy process, there's testing and there's security.
What are they testing for when you have to do a Foreign Service test? I hear that term a lot, but I never understood what the test actually is.
It wasn't, this was some years ago, right? So this was like 12 years ago. I don't remember it being too difficult, honestly. I had this great fear, and I don't mean this in kind of a cocky way or anything.
Yeah.
If you were up to date on current affairs and you read some American history, and then, if you did, like I studied, I don't think you need to have like a master's degree from Georgetown. I guess what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Well, you had a Hamilton education. You're a smart guy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I passed that. And I think, that's the harder bar is the interview. There's two parts to it. There's the test and then the interview. And that's more subjective. And a lot of people, I think that's where a good amount, I don't know the exact precise details, but I remember in my class of folks, I think there were about 20 people that took the interview. I think only 4 of us passed. And there were some impressive folks that came. I remember there was a guy who spoke fluent Farsi. He was a lawyer, and like, he didn't get it, like, what'd you do? But, there was a writing portion to it. There was kind of a role playing. But the thing is, there's a lot of literature on both of them online. So, I did what any good Hamilton student would do and researched it and saw where people kind of, had pitfalls. Like if you didn't listen to instructions, for example. But I also had the advantage at that time because I was working on diplomatic security. Mm-hmm. So I knew how, when there was cases of like, in this emergency, what does an embassy do, for example? I was aware of that because I had been involved in some of those things. So it's a strange, this doesn't happen too often, but things kind of lucked out for me in that regard.
And what was the draw to Foreign Service?
Well, I think
going to Bali and hitting the beach.
Yeah, exactly. I had grown up overseas. I really valued my time in Saudi. Yeah. I thought it was an amazing experience. I loved it, and there's a part of it. At this point, I have 2 kids, and I thought of that, and I'd known about the Foreign Service, and it was something attractive. And then in the Army, I'd lived in Germany, and I was like, wow, this is great. I'm here in Germany, but I'm not living as some American, just totally independent in Germany. I have the U.S. Army infrastructure, And I'm like, that'd be great if I could do that in many countries. I'm like, there is an organization that is like that, and it's the
Yeah.
Foreign Service. You do have an infrastructure, but public service, of course. The was attractive. I love the U.S. very much. I mean, I think it's the most amazing country, and I wanted to promote U.S. values and what we do and promote our interests. And it comes from a very genuine place.
Yeah.
And I thought that being in the Army, particularly, you meet so many interesting folks and from just a wide range of backgrounds, and whether it's race or class or geographic region, everyone.
Yeah.
And it's amazing, and it really just shows such what a strong and diverse country we are. And all of that packaged together is the Foreign Service. It's the public service, it's life abroad, it's challenging work.
It's amazing to me. There are so many people across this country who absolutely love this country and wrap themselves in the flag, but use that as a reason to shut themselves off from the rest of the world and either don't travel there or care about the rest of the world. But here you are, someone who absolutely loves this country and is representing it around the world and comes to love the country more because of what you experience around the world. And it's a shame that more people can't appreciate that. I mean, I haven't traveled nearly as much as you have, but have traveled parts of the world. And you appreciate what's out there. You appreciate other countries, and you appreciate even more what you have.
Yeah, no, that's true. Of course, we have problems, and
really, I had noticed.
Yeah. We've always had problems, but you go and you live overseas, and everyone's got problems, and many of them are worse than ours. Yeah. And many countries do not have the long history and the democratic traditions that we do.
Yeah.
And often it's not that hard to promote U.S. interests, because our interests are democracy and prosperity and open societies, and that's largely what most people also have an affinity towards. So, I've often thought, if I was a diplomat from a different country, trying to promote their values, it's different,
Right.
It's much easier being from the United States, because I think, we do have great traditions and a great example by and large.
You mentioned a lot of the work you do is helping Americans abroad. And I would guess that in the age of a pandemic, there's been some work that you've had to do to help people navigate that.
Yeah. So a consular officer, if you're looking at, if anyone listeners are looking to join the Foreign Service and wondering, what kind of cone you'd want to be, I would always pitch consular, because it's kind of a cliche in the Foreign Service. We always have the best stories, because you are meeting either, whether you're doing visa work, which is challenging and humorous and very interesting, of the characters you meet through that work, but also American citizens. I mean, one of in Cambodia, for example, one of the things we do is, if you get arrested, right, a consular officer will come and visit you and make sure that you're being treated fairly per local laws, that you're not being singled out as an American citizen. And during that tour, it was just 2 years. I mean, I probably went to 7 different prisons throughout the country, and I would go every month, but I would also be involved in many different incidents. I mean, the people who pass away overseas, or maybe there's someone who's getting in trouble with the police or immigration. I would get a call. It was undoubtedly a Friday night. I'd get a call, and you get to meet a lot of interesting situations and sometimes help resolve them. And this is again where local language comes in. So there's also misperception that if you get in jail and you have an American passport, you get off, and that's not the case. But sometimes, I have been involved in things where I was able to, talk to folks and explain and maybe de-escalate a situation. So, but like you said, talking about COVID, Yeah, no, when this all went down, I was at the office. I was in the Office of Overseas Citizen Services. That was really kind of the point for the department, and so I got to experience the whole chronology of our response from being on a task force that to help our diplomats and personnel from Wuhan get home.
Mhm.
So we were on the task force monitoring, assisting on the ground, and also getting some Americans that were in Wuhan back to the U.S. at that time. That was January. To being in the conversations as we started changing our travel advisory program, because one of the main things that we do here in Washington is advise U.S. citizens about traveling
Mhm.
abroad.
Right.
We have a rating system as well, and we're providing travel advice, which people can take. It's not a requirement because we say don't go there, that you can't go there. But it generally means if you're telling you don't go there, there's reasons for it.
Yeah.
So I would plug, travel.state.gov, which has all that information. So we were, looking at China, looking at some of those countries that were COVID. As it started, as it started escalating in different regions of the world, to Europe, and then it got to the point in March where we set up a task force and things like a worldwide task force, and so that was my life for a good couple months.
Wow.
It was 24/7. It's maybe, I don't want to say it's a unsung story, but I think it's the largest operation the department's done since World War II. We got over 100,000 Americans home from over 130 countries through every means possible, through commercial airlines, through chartered flights, through Department of Defense flights, cooperation from immigration customs enforcement flights where we could. Big borrow steal.
Yeah.
And
is that a lot of what it is hustling and getting on the phone and talking people into helping get these people home?
I mean, I never seen anything like it before. I've been involved in, with Indonesia, involved with natural disasters. It's just like every single type of natural disaster that you can think of. So I was familiar with, crises type events, but this is worldwide, where we had instructions to, our 270 posts, our embassies and consulates worldwide, and all of them needed some guidance. All of them, it was a moving, shifting situation as countries were shutting down, because even if countries didn't have high number of COVID cases, they may be shutting down flights. So then you have Americans in those countries that are getting stuck.
Yeah.
So asking to come home. It was quite remarkable. And what amazed me more than anything else was just the quality of officers in the Foreign Service, people that, some folks who had been evacuated from overseas that came to Washington were joining our task force, just volunteering, like, put me on, let me do anything. I want to,
Wow.
We had all these kind of teams. We had teams that had to engage with Congress. We had teams engaging on media matters. Of course, teams that directly working with our embassies and consulates and the airlines and Department of Defense, whatever it was, whatever that particular situation was.
Yeah.
And just the sheer quality of folks and the energy and dedication. It was just remarkable.
So looking back, I mean, you've literally been all around the world and had incredible experiences. Anything you wish you had known?
I was thinking about this, and some things I did well. I think I took a lot of different classes, and I didn't just focus on my major, because in some of those classes that I took at Hamilton, just as like, oh, maybe this is a good thing to I'm just kind of curious. That introduced me to maybe a topic that I've since followed, either through just reading books or following in the news, or just being interested in that subject. So I would definitely encourage to max out the courses that you can take at Hamilton and explore different fields that just maybe just interest you, even if it's just one class. Like I remember I took a constitutional law class that I I'm not a lawyer now or anything, but it was amazingly fascinating and so well taught. But I wish I had known that, there's the people you're with, and there's so many amazing colleagues and friends, and I don't know. I think I probably had, if you'd asked me, where certain people would be, I probably would have felt that, if I guessed like what career path so and so would have taken, I think I would have felt that I would be pretty accurate. Like, oh, Dave's going to be this person, and this guy's going to be this person. And yeah, people have really gone in so many different ways than I could have ever imagined. And I wish, I wish I had done a better job of staying in touch.
Yeah.
And even though it's probably much easier to do that today with all the things than it was in 99, but I think still, like when you just got out of college, you are kind of thinking about yourself a lot because you're starting off a new career, and maybe unless you're in like New York and Boston with all your buddies,
right.
It's easy to just get focused on doing what you're doing and not keeping in touch as much. And so I wish I'd done a better job. I've since reconnected with a number of people, but that's probably what I would advise folks.
Well, who the hell could keep track of you, Rob? You're all over the world. No one knows where you are.
It's my fault, right? It is, yeah. No.
All right, that's Rob Romanowski, class of 1999. To think about the summers he spent. All right, I talked last week about current Hamilton students calling me trying to get internships. I think about my summers in college, cleaning fish tanks one summer, painting a neighbor's house another summer, working at a radio station my third summer. And there's Rob going off to military training, jumping out of airplanes. Incredible. He's an incredible guy. He's a great guy. You could always sense that military background or that military experience coming off of Rob. And I always admired him for it. Always knew that there was a strong moral compass with the guy, so it doesn't surprise me that he's made his life's work helping Americans, helping people. And it's good to know if I get in trouble somewhere in another country, I can call Rob. Chances are he could probably help me. My thanks to Rob Romanowski for joining this week. And good luck in Uzbekistan, Rob. I look forward to seeing pictures. You have been listening to Had I Known on WHCL-FM, Clinton, New York. HadIKnown.buzzsprout.com. Had I Known Show on social media. As always, my thanks to Dr. Michael Woods for supplying the music on this show, and once again, Doc is going to play us out. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll talk to you next week.
Had I Known podcast show on your radio or take it to go.